Good morning. So, I decided to start my morning by reading, and as always, I have been going back to the Big Magic, partly because I personally view my life to be, or I want my life to be, a creative life, meaning where I not only become just a consumer of all the things that's being produced in our world full of information. um, in the world, there's so much contents everywhere, um, and I want to be creative and I want to be productive because I feel um, I need a sense of purpose, and and I also believe that I need to create that sense of purpose, or find that sense of purpose for myself. And creativity, meaning where you actively participate to create something for yourself, create an experience for yourself. I don't believe that creativity is exclusively uh, for people like artists. It can be that you can live life creatively, and I am um, very happy that I bumped onto this book. This book is all about creative living beyond fear. Yes, fear is another component to it because when we express ourselves, I believe there's a fear that tries to stop us in expressing. And every chapter that I read, and it just gives me some more insights. And this chapter that I'm reading, uh, the chapter is called Trust. And the first section, I absolutely loved it. And the moment I finished the section, I felt I want to share it. And the section starts, the name of the section is Does It Love You? My friend Dr. Robin Wall Kimmerer is a botanist and an author who teaches environmental biology at SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry in Syracuse, New York. Her students are all fervent young environmentalists, earnest as can be, desperate to save the world. Before they can get down to the business of world saving, though, Robin often asks her students these two questions. The first question is, do you love nature? Every hand in the room goes up. The second question is, do you believe that nature loves you in return? Every hand in the room goes down. At which point Robin says, then we have a problem already. The problem is this: these earnest young world savers honestly believe that the living earth is indifferent to them. They believe that humans are nothing but passive consumers, and that our presence here on earth is a destructive force. We take, and offer nothing of benefit to nature in return. They believe that humans are here on this planet by random accident, and that therefore the earth doesn't give a damn about us. Ancient people did not see it this way. Needless to say, our ancestors always operated with a sense of being in a reciprocal emotional relationship with their physical surroundings. Whether they felt that they were being rewarded by Mother Nature or punished by her, at least they were engaged in a constant conversation with her. Robin believes that modern people have lost the sense of conversation, lost that awareness of the earth communicating with us just as much as we are communicating with it. Instead, modern people have been schooled to believe that nature is deaf and blind to them, perhaps because we believe that nature has no inherent sentience, which is a somewhat pathological construct because it denies any possibility of relationship. Even the notion of a punitive Mother Earth is better than the notion of an indifferent one, because at least anger represents some sort of energetic exchange. Without that sense of relationship, Robin warns her students they're missing out on something incredibly important. They're missing out on something incredibly important. They're missing out on their potential to become co creators of life. As Robin puts it, this exchange of love between earth and people calls forth the creative gifts of both. The earth is not indifferent to us, but rather calling for our gifts in return for hers. The reciprocal nature of life and creativity. Or to put it more simply, nature provides the seed, man provides the garden. Each is grateful, each is grateful for the other's help. I absolutely love this metaphor. Nature provides the seed, man provides the garden. Each is grateful for the other's help. So Robin always begins right there before she can teach these students how to heal the world. She has to teach she has to teach them how to heal their notion of themselves in the world. She has to convince them of their right to even be here at all. Again, the arrogance of belonging. She has to introduce them to the concept that they might actually be loved. Oh, where have you been? That's my dog. That's my dog. Yes. Okay. Okay, you can just lie down with me. Just lie down. Okay. She's just lying down with me. Okay, you want to join me? Okay. Okay. Oh, just a good girl. Good girl. Okay, where were we? So, to put it more simply, nature provides the seed, man provides the garden. Each is grateful for others' help. So, Robin always begins right there, before she can teach these students how to heal the world. She has to teach them how to heal their notion of themselves in the world. And I think this is the part that really struck me. She has to teach them how to heal their notion of themselves in the world. I think the idea is recently I talked with my sister also, is that is it possible to love others without loving your own self? That's a very fundamental question, because if you don't love yourself, and I think in our modern world, or maybe I don't know about the ancient world, but if I don't love myself, or if you don't love your own existence and the things that you are doing, are you truly capable of loving, giving the true love to others. That's something to explore, and I have been thinking about it recently. So it probably goes um, along the same line here. So we first need to understand our existence in our world. So there's a fun, like there's a spectrum between selflessness and selfishness. Self love is definitely not being selfish, and um, doing for yourself. Uh, yeah, I mean, I need to explore more about this idea. I feel like. So Robin always begins right there. Before she can teach these students how to heal the world, she has to teach them how to heal their notion of themselves in the world. She has to convince them of their right to even be here at all. Again, the arrogance of belonging. She has to introduce them to the concept that they might actually be loved in return by the very entity that they themselves revere, by nature itself. She has to introduce them to the concept that they might actually be loved in return by the very entity that they themselves revere, by nature itself, by the very entity that created them. Because otherwise, it's never going to work. Because otherwise, nobody, not the earth, not the students, not any of us will ever benefit. So that's the chapter called Does It Love You? Now I'll read two more chapters or sections in the chapter called Trust. This chapter's name is interesting, and this is an excellent metaphor she used. The name of the section is called Worst Girlfriend Ever. Inspired by this notion, I now often ask aspiring young writers the same line of questions. Do you love writing? I ask. Of course they do, duh. Then I ask, do you believe that writing loves you in return? They look at me like I should be institutionalized. Of course not, they say. Most of them report that writing is totally indifferent to them. And if they do happen to feel a reciprocal relationship with their creativity, it is usually a deeply sick relationship. In many cases, these young writers claim that writing flat out hates them. Writing messes with their heads. Writing torments them and hides from them. Writing punishes them. Writing destroys them. Writing kicks their asses 10 ways to Sunday. As one young writer I know put it, for me, writing is like that beachy, beautiful girl in high school who you always worshipped, but who only toyed with you for her own purposes. You know in your heart that she is bad news, and you should probably just walk away from her forever, but she always lures you back in. Just when you think she is finally going to be your girlfriend, she shows up at school holding hands with the captain of the football team, pretending she's never met you. All you can do is weep in a locked bathroom stall. Writing is evil. That being the case, I asked him, what do you want to do with your life? And he said, I want to be a writer. This is an amazing metaphor where she actually she used I personally have been having a lot of trouble feeling motivated. I mean, I personally uh, am a programmer, and I believe a programmer has the ability to create a program, and when definitely with the skill set of logic and with the skill set of um, making the computer listen to you, making it do the way um, you want it to behave in some way. I mean, it's and I do believe that programming can be art. You can, just like you can craft your if you are a sculptor and you are making a sculpture, and you're starting from nothing and then you're sculpting it little by little, and you have a final shape that you want it to give, and sometimes it's very clear to you, sometimes it's not very clear to you. A program is also a program, a computer program, just like an application. Like we all use phone and we write apps, and uh, that people use and people interact with. And now in the social media, we programmers create this space for people, that people, how you can send a message, or how you can like, where will be the button, and all this design that needs to be done in a program. There can be a lot of creative, and unfortunately a lot of programmers are very geeky, boring people. They don't see it in such creative fashion, and which exactly um, matches with what we are talking about here. The idea is that um, something that you create, whether you love to create it, and the idea that the thing that you are creating, whether um, that inanimate thing, the creation, whether that creation is loving you back in some way, in some very spiritual way. It needs to be a reciprocal relationship, and just like she was mentioning earlier, that the environmentalists who love the environment, as a human being, we need to we need to think that, okay, who we are in the nature. And we think, if we think that nature is just a deaf, dumb entity, and human beings are just destroying the nature, and we need to save the nature. But the idea that she brings forth in this book is that, believing that nature is deaf and dumb, you are not going to be someone who can create a relationship with nature. If you are truly wanting to save the nature, you should not be believing that nature is just a deaf and dumb, and an entity without life that cannot reciprocate with you. So just like in this section, I'm reading this book called The Big Magic, The Creative Way of Living Beyond Fear. And this section is called again The Worst Girlfriend Ever, where she again used another metaphor, that a writer, when so how many writers really love writing? Like they love writing, uh, but do they believe that writing loves them back? And most writers, basically, even though they love writing, but they think that it's sort of um, a very painful process. And whether it's a mutual reciprocal relationship again is what she tries to point here. So next section that I would like to read is called Addicted to Suffering. So are you beginning to see how screwed up this is? It is not only aspiring writers who feel this way. Older established authors say exactly the same dark things about their own work. Where do you think the young writers learned it from? Norman Mailer claimed that every one of his books had killed him a little more. Philip Roth has never stopped talking about the medieval torments writing inflicted upon him for the duration of his long suffering career. Oscar Wilde called the artistic existence one long lovely suicide. I adore Wilde, but I have trouble seeing suicide as lovely. I have trouble seeing any of this anguish as lovely. And it's not just writers who feel this way, visual artists do it too. Here's the painter Francis Bacon. The feelings of desperation and unhappiness are more useful to an artist than the feeling of contentment because desperation and unhappiness stretch your whole sensibility. Actors do it, dancers do it, and musicians most certainly do it. Rufus Wainwright once admitted that he was terrified to settle down into a happy relationship because without the emotional drama that come from all those dysfunctional love affairs, he was afraid of losing access to that dark lake of pain he felt was so crucial to his music. And let's not even get started on the poets. Suffice it to say that the modern language of creativity, from its youngest aspirants up to its acknowledged masters, is steeped in pain, desolation, and dysfunction. Numberless artists toil away in total emotional and physical solitude, disassociated not only from other humans but also from the source of creativity itself. Or their relationship with their work is often emotionally violent. You want to make something, you are told to open up a vein and bleed. Time to edit your work, you are instructed to kill your darlings. Ask a writer how his book is going, and he might say, I finally broke its spine this week. And that's if he had a good week. So I think she is trying to bring this idea. I don't know how modern it is this idea, like at least few hundred years is this, that creativity or producing anything, so you need to go through this pain and suffering or sort of desolation, dysfunction that she the words that use, like any creative process, it's kind of like those idea of love and hate. You need to hate it, or you need to go through this painful process to create it, which is true. But the idea is how you view it. I think she, of course, it's painful. Of course, it's very difficult. Of course, it's hard. Of course, you are going to suffer when you get out of your comfort zone to create something. But how do you view it? It's sort of like, maybe I can bring a metaphor. Sort of like, let's say you have a child. Like now, this is my dog, and I just recently started fostering her, and I'm thinking about adopting her. And I can see like how hard it is. Like she makes me. She will poop, she will pee. She had 3 seizures already. The doctors told that she has epilepsy, and I can see like in one way I love her so much, but at the same time, some days are so difficult, and it can be so painful. But how I view that pain is very important, right? Whether I hate it, I don't think I hate it. It's just that that's where the true love emerges. That's where the reciprocal relationship emerges, and that's what it's my dog. It's a real life, but I think because this book is about creativity, she's pointing towards that you should not be viewing that love, or you should not be hating that love. You should not be having a negative attitude towards that painful process. I'm not sure I'm being able to express it rightly, but she is trying to figure an alternative way of viewing those pain, or alternative way of when she says that line here that she has to teach them how to heal their notion of themselves in the world. So, yeah. The next section is called a cautionary tale. One of the most interesting up and coming novelists I know these days is a clever young woman named Katie Arnold Ratliff. Katie writes like a dream, but she told me that she'd gotten blocked from her work for several years because of something a writing professor had said to her. The writing professor had said to her, unless you are emotionally uncomfortable while you are writing, you will never produce anything of value. Now, there's a level at which I understand what Katie's writing professor might have been trying to say. I think I was trying to point out the same thing here. Perhaps the intended message was don't be afraid of reaching for your creative edge, or never back away from the discomfort that can sometimes arise while you are working. These seem like perfectly legitimate notions to me, but to suggest that nobody ever made valuable art unless they were in active emotional distress is not only untrue, it's also kind of sick. But Katie believed it. Out of respect and deference to her professor, Katie took those words to heart and came to embrace the notion that if her creative process wasn't bringing her anguish, then she wasn't doing it right. No blood, no glory, right? The problem was Katie had an idea for a novel that actually made her feel excited. The book she wanted to write seemed so cool, so twisted, and so strange that she thought it might genuinely be fun to do it. In fact, it seemed like so much fun. It made her feel guilty because if something was a pleasure to write, then it couldn't possibly have any artistic value, could it? So she put off writing that cool and twisted novel of hers for years and years because she didn't trust in the legitimacy of her own anticipated pleasure. Eventually, I am happy to report she broke through that mental obstacle and finally wrote her book. And no, it was not necessarily easy to write, but she did have a great time writing it, and yes, it is brilliant. What a pity, though, to have lost all those years of inspired creativity, and only because she didn't believe her work was making her miserable enough. Yeah, heaven forbid anyone should enjoy their chosen vocation. I'll end by after reading this section. This section is called The Teaching of Pain. Sadly, Katie's story is no anomaly. Far too many creative people have been taught to distrust pleasure and to put their faith in struggle alone. Too many artists still believe that anguish is the only truly authentic emotional experience. They could have picked up this dark idea anywhere. It's a commonly held belief here in the Western world that with our weighty emotional heritage of Christian sacrifice and German romanticism, both of which give excessive credence to the merits of agony. Well, I guess these are the roots, the Christian sacrifice and yeah, and German romanticism. Trusting in nothing but suffering is a dangerous path, though. Suffering has a reputation for killing off artists, for one thing, but even when it doesn't kill them, an addiction to pain can sometimes throw artists into such severe mental disorder that they stop working at all. My favorite refrigerator magnet. I have suffered enough. When does my artwork improve? I have suffered enough. When does my artwork improve? Perhaps you too were taught to trust in darkness. Maybe you were even taught darkness by creative people whom you loved and admired. I certainly was. When I was in high school, a beloved English teacher once told me, you are a talented writer, Liz, but unfortunately, you will never make it because you haven't suffered enough in your life. What a twisted thing to say. First of all, what does a middle aged man know about a teenage girl suffering? I had probably suffered more that day at lunch than he'd ever suffered in his entire lifetime. But beyond that, since when did creativity become a suffering contest? I had admired that teacher. I imagine if I had taken his words to heart and had dutifully set out on some shadowy Byronic quest for authenticating tribulation. Mercifully, I didn't. My instincts drove me in the opposite direction, toward light, toward play, toward a more trusting engagement with creativity. But I am a lucky one. Others do go on that dark crusade, and sometimes they go there on purpose. All my musical heroes were junkies, and I just wanted to be one too, says my dear friend Raya Elias, a gifted songwriter who battled heroin addiction for over a decade, during which time she lived in prison, on the streets, and in mental hospitals, and completely stopped making music. Raya isn't the only artist who ever mistook self destruction for a serious minded commitment to creativity. The jazz saxophonist Jackie McLean said that back in Greenwich Village in the 1950s, he watched dozens of aspiring young musicians take up heroin in order to imitate their hero Charlie Parker. More tellingly still, Maclean says he witnessed many young jazz aspirants pretending to be heroin addicts, eyes half closed, striking that slouched pose. Even as Parker himself begged people not to emulate this most tragic aspect of himself. But maybe it's easier to do heroin or even to romantically pretend to do heroin than it is to commit yourself wholeheartedly to your craft. Addiction does not make the artist. Raymond Carver, for one, intimately knew this to be true. He himself was an alcoholic, and he was never able to become the writer he needed to be, not even on the subject of alcoholism itself, until he gave up the booze. As he said, any artist who is an alcoholic is an artist despite their alcoholism, not because of it. I agree. I believe that our creativity grows like sidewalk weeds out of the cracks between our pathologies, not from the pathologies themselves. But so many people think it's the other way around. For this reason, you will often meet artists who deliberately cling to their suffering, their addictions, their fears, their demons. They worry that if they ever let go of all that anguish, their very identities would vanish. Think of Rilke, who's famously said, if my devils are to leave me, I'm afraid my angels will take flight as well. Rilke was a glorious poet, and that line is elegantly rendered, but it's also severely emotionally warped. Unfortunately, I've heard that line quoted countless times by creative people who were offering up an excuse as to why they won't quit drinking, or why they won't go see a therapist, or why they won't consider treatment for their depression or anxiety, or why they won't address their sexual misconduct or their intimacy problems, or why they basically refuse to seek personal healing and growth in any manner whatsoever because they don't want to lose their suffering. Because they don't want to lose their suffering. So I know it very well. I mean, you sort of create this relationship with your own melancholy. So you love your own melancholy, your own sadness so much that kind of like makes you believe that otherwise you kind of like sort of lose your sense of your own self, which is destructive. It's like a cyclical process of destruction. And some maybe creative people, or maybe everybody, maybe subconsciously we are trapped in that, and recognizing that trap is very important. So, anyway, the last line of this section, people have a strange trust in their devils. Indeed. I like her writing. This sentence is so interesting. People have a strange trust in their devils. Okay, I will end it there. Thank you, whoever joined. So I was reading from this book, The Big Magic. I've been spending my time with this book for almost a year now. So I decided to share my reading from it today. Thank you.